November 1st, and we're going to have a really interesting conversation today around what we notice, what we don't notice around the norms of authority. So let me welcome my co-hosts. Whoops, I just took you out of the whole stream. Here we go. One of these days I'll get this all figured out so seamlessly.
Hi, Christy. Hi, Stella.
Hello.
So today's topic is what we know, what we notice around accepted norms of authority. And before we get started, as will become our routine or our ritual, we'll ask Ijuma to offer up an agreement or two, something for us to keep in mind as we make our way through this conversation.
So what I'm thinking about is humility. And thinking about how we learn and grow. Because this might be a new subject for some people. This might be something people already know, but there's more to engage in when we talk about white dominant culture and these norms. And so I would just want people to really sit and be humble, and before they feel defensive or like you don't know what you're talking about, just like take a breath and be humble to the learning experience that we're going to have.
Take a breath. All right. And then we're going to ask Isela on that note to help ground us as we maybe feel our lids flipping or feeling defensive or feeling anxious or feeling even excited, like, yeah, let's go, like, amen, let's do it. What can I burn next? How can we get grounded a little bit? Isela, what do you got for us today?
I think that, I always talk about noticing what's happening in our physical body. Where are you experiencing it? And allowing ourselves to feel it and try to understand it. But I'm going to go one step further. Okay. When I had my daughter, she's 12 years old, I happened to have her in the middle of writing a dissertation. And I lost my mind.
As you do.
It was insane. So I was like, I don't know, bad pregnancy. I was trying to write a dissertation. I had her in a boppy. I was trying to nurse her while I had a computer. It was awful. And it was just working on that is hard. But there were times where I just felt like, and I was up against that 7-year mark, and I was like, I have to get this done. And I remember just feeling hopeless, like I did all this work for nothing, and I'm not going to finish it. And my dissertation mentor, my doctoral mentor, he said to me, Isela, courage is always available. Mm-hmm. And I was like, oh my, and I, it was one of those things, and I did it in the classroom when I was with kids. It was like, courage is always available. And for me, it was always in this heart space. So every time I start to get uneasy or unsettled, or I'm starting to feel that level of discomfort that I don't know what to do with just yet, I notice it, and then will put my hand in that heart space and say to myself, courage is always available. And so for me, I can step into the experience courageously. Sometimes that means taking a couple deep breaths. Sometimes that just means noticing what's around me to get me grounded in this space, but just to remember that I get to choose.
I appreciate that, because I feel like they are matched in a way, and maybe in a paradoxical way, but to have humility takes courage. Mm-hmm. And so I appreciate both of those, that we'll think about what can we learn and where can we grow, but also to have the courage to lean in and to grow and to listen. All right. So I'm going to start us off with a non-educational story. And then, so if you're just joining us and you're like, why are we talking about baseball? Because if I'm not talking about beer, then I'm usually talking about baseball. But I'm a vegan, so don't worry, we won't talk about hot dogs. So Isela and I were talking this weekend, and I don't even remember what triggered the conversation, to be honest, but it bothers me often, things that I notice. Oh, I remember I was watching a webinar with Bettina Love and a bunch of others in the Abolitionist Teaching Network, and they were inviting children to notice when something feels off, or notice who's in your National Honor Society, or notice who's not on your team, or notice who's in your grocery store and not in that grocery store. So I was like, I've noticed for a long time, and it's bothered me even before COVID, how so many sports that I love and I sponsor, support, whatever, are often the performers, the entertainers are Black, brown, and the owners and the fans are white. And so now, fast forward COVID, and I'm watching baseball, and they start putting up these photographs of people, like big life-size things of people, and it drives me crazy because right behind home base, it's just a sea of whiteness, usually white men, and then there's like a token picture of like some past baseball player that they're honoring without saying like, why was there a color line to begin with? Like, let's just and so then I think that bothers me. And so anyway, I told all that story to Isela, and then she got us talking about, and Juma, you're going to have to give us the background, how conferences, professional development, teacher preparation, once again, we have a global majority who's Black, brown, indigenous, but the people that hold or say they have the authority or the knowledge tend to be the white male or white. So you want to now take my baseball and bring it into the world of early childhood.
Did you want me to go first?
Yeah, if you don't mind with that example from the conference.
So yeah, I've always noticed that, and I talk about it before I agree to be a part of something. That's always a conversation I have with organizers, or sometimes, or if I feel like, it's an opportunity to educate and talk to some people about the choices that they're making, then I might choose to be a part of something to continue that conversation. And I think things just come up on my feed, and then I looked, I was like, this is overwhelmingly white. Like, they didn't even do tokenism.
Right? They didn't even do tokenism.
Like, because when you posted that, I sat there for a good 5 minutes just looking at it, because it was one of those things where I thought, did no one notice this? Or do folks, like, I'm really trying to understand this, because do folks notice it and think what? That this is okay because it always has been? Or is there an underlying message?
Yeah. Let's break that down for a minute. So imagine those of you listening, imagine some sort of flyer with all the headshots of all the speakers. And let's say there's 12 speakers, and they are a mixture of gender by looking at them. I don't know what their pronouns are. And they all look pretty abled. I don't know what disabled looks like, but you know what I mean? Like, there's nothing that distinguishes them in any certain way. And they were all white. And so what I think is fascinating is if they were all Black, I bet one of two things. Here's my binary. One of two things. White people will be like, oh, that's not for me. Or somebody's like, hey, where's the white people? Reverse racism, which you can't have, which we could talk about. But you're right. There wasn't even tokenism. And then like Claudia is mentioning in the chat that lots of times in early childhood, it's not all men, but it is still all women, and they are all white or predominantly, or there's tokenism. So pick one of these: tokenism, why we do it, reverse racism. I don't know. Pick one.
And so I think the thing that we want to remember when we're accepting the norm of authority, that norm is always white. Because there's no reverse racism. Like, the authority, we live in a white dominant culture, and that authority is white. And so that's the norm. And so that's one of the reasons why people don't notice. And also because that authority holds power, why people might not say something, right? A lot of times people are just glad, like, to be the token to get into the door, right? Because they don't want to accept that power structure.
So a person of color will not do the things you did, which say, unless you diversify it, I'm not presenting.
Right.
Because they're like, I finally got in.
Right. But I have, like, at this point in my career, like, I have that privilege, and I hold some power and influence of, like, if I say no, like that doesn't mean other people aren't going to hire me, right? Even if people get mad, like I still have other opportunities.
The risk
So
is
I do
lower
have
for you at
that
this point.
privilege to do that, and I have said no to a lot of money and a lot of exposure. But like I'm not going to just be the token. Like if I'm going to come, like you're going to treat me like you treat the mediocre white man that you asked to be part of this, right? That you're going to pay me on that scale. Because I've also had times where I've been invited and come to find out that I'm the least paid person. And it's like, what's that about?
And I was going to say, Ijuma, that I would think that not like, let's say the power structure, like let's say a white male or even let's say a white female, like I may be in a position where I can take it for free. I can do that because I have all this other privilege. And then another speaker who doesn't have all that privilege needs to be paid. So just can't say, well, you know, Christy's doing it for free, so you have to. Like there's a bit of that. And then it also seems that the tokenism goes a deeper, and I'm be quiet because I want to hear you, Isela, too, is a bit further. It's almost like, well, we need to talk about equity. So Ijuma, can you, like, because Ijuma doesn't know anything about loose parts or play. Like it's almost like we not only make you the token, but we're going to tell you what we want you to talk about. I don't know, Isela, if you've had that experience as well, or your thoughts about that.
I guess I'm really in this space of being irritated.
Oh, watch out.
I'm irritated by the fact that, you know, and I've shared this story with you all. I've done marketing for, you know, I do marketing. I do like graphic design sort of stuff with pictures, images of children, and real images of children. So, you know, a lot of programs want their children represented, right? And so often I'll take a look at other, you know, things that are pushed out for marketing purposes, and they're mostly white families, mostly white children, mostly. And, you know, I'm in Arizona where, you know, there are a lot of us brown folks here, and we have a lot of Native Americans in Arizona, and we are grossly represented in the images that represent, you know, agencies that serve here in Arizona. And so as I'm listening to you all, and I'm thinking of just that frame of reference, my experience of feeling so irritated by all of that, accepting it because it is power, there's power behind that, and accepting it because it feels like we have just adopted the perspective that it just is that way. You know, like we don't even think to notice or to say something that why not? You know, why not?
And why it matters. So let's hold the why it matters just for a second, because I think what actually happens is double worse. The only time we do represent, and I'm using we as white people, when we tend to over-represent somebody who's Black or Indigenous or of color, is in a negative light. So if it's like something that's like your kid's off the deep end and bad, you're going to see like some kid of color having a tantrum. Or if like we give out freebies for breakfast, or I'm making up crap, you know what I mean? Then we'll see a mom who's like got 5 kids, like she's homeless, right? And now all of a sudden we find images that are different than white people. So it's almost like a double whammy in the sense that it's not represented, and then when we do, it's in the negative.
Yeah, because who controls the narrative? Who controls the narrative? Right? So that representation, the tokenism, is not about them giving up power, right? It's just having that person as a showpiece. So like I can keep my power, right? I can keep my authority. But look, no one should say anything because look at the beautiful brown faces I have in my promotional material. Or like, oh, look, we have one presenter. So no one said, because it's not about that person actually talking about their expertise. It's about looking good, like that performative piece of it. Because then you can still hold on to power and look good.
So let me tell you a story. You know, all of my work experience when I was a director and a teacher and all that has been in crisis intervention. So I've done early, working with families and children sort of in those crises circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
You don't know how many times, because we would seek money, donations from people. And you don't know how many times groups of white people would come in. And we had large windows where you could see in our classrooms. And how uncomfortable. I mean, we had this conversation always about what it felt like to be inside those classrooms. Felt like we were in a zoo.
Yeah.
And I remember this was many years ago, like 20 years ago. I remember like even the conversations around making our kiddos look worse off.
Mm-hmm.
Making them look worse off for photos, or when we would have these tours come in so that they would donate money, and that we were and it was, I was like the board of directors and all that. Look at what we're doing, to these poor Black and brown children.
Yeah, I've worked in centers where whoever was gathering the images have said, "Oh, don't wipe their faces. Oh, don't put a different shirt on them," right?
Yeah.
Because I'm like, I'm not doing that, because you're gonna have to talk to their mama about how they got a picture of their dirty face and their dirty shirt. Like, we're gonna put on a clean shirt and wipe their face, because that's about like, oh, look at being the white savior and look at how we're going to save and donate this money for us to look good, right? Not exactly about actually supporting and moving resources around, but about looking good. Look at what I'm doing. Look how I'm saving these poor Black and brown children.
And so one of the things I can hear white people, because I can hear my own head, is saying, well,
I almost wanted to say something about that, but I didn't. Go ahead.
Except for the way I'm going to imitate myself wasn't quite how I sound, okay? But let's say these white people are putting together a podcast or a conference or a guest lecture in their courses or whatever, and they go, but I don't know anybody that's an expert that's also Black, Indigenous, or person of color. Like, these are the top people in the field. All right, go.
Like they're liars, Christy. Right? Because one, the system that they're holding onto that system, and of course, most white people only know other white people, right? Because they don't really benefit from having close relationships with people of color, right? Because why? Especially if they can't be the savior, if they can't be the person on top, then like they're not very interested in those relationships. And so a lot of times, like, people know me, people know Isela, but they don't always want to work with us.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's easier to work with you, right? Because you're like the better fit. And like, and most of these people work, like, if you work in early childhood, most of the time that there is some connection to people of color. It might not be in your particular school, but maybe the school down the street or across town does, right? Do you network with them? Like, do you know them? Do you know the work that they're doing? Do you invite them? Do you go to their events?
Right.
Like, you don't know because you choose not to know, right? And it's easier for you to just sit back and keep the norm, right? Because you don't have to do anything.
But, I think the other side of that, Ijuman, tell me what you think about this, because, when teachers do the tourist approach in the classrooms, sometimes it's so forced, though. It's like, oh, let's check the box because we've got somebody who's diverse, who provided some sort of PD, maybe it's health and safety, but she was brown. let's check the box and then invite her again next year. It's like, I think we really have to sort of get honest about that too. Like, how do we understand one another as opposed to checking a box? Because I know folks do that. They look at, how many brown people do we have? How many black people do we have? Okay, does it look like, as opposed to an authentic opportunity for understanding and relationships.
But I feel like that's the onus. That's the part. Like if I don't know your expertise, or I don't know enough experts who are Black or brown or indigenous, that's so on me. To just assume that there probably aren't any because I haven't read their stuff is still saying because I'm reading the same people's stuff and they're citing the same people. And so to say they don't exist means I haven't done any effort to find them.
Right. And also that we've all been educated, right? Like, who are the theories that we're introduced to? Right. If you don't go outside of, you don't seek that out.
I wondered that too.
Mm-hmm. Like you don't know. And so it's not only like that checking off the box, if you don't actually give people the resources and share the power, right? That they get to decide what they're going to do and how they're going to do it. And if you're just bringing in this outside person and you still don't have a diverse staff, you still don't have like directors. Like when you look at leadership, even in early childhood, the majority of directors and administrators are white women.
Yeah.
And so thinking about how you're using your power, and if you're looking around and going to directors meetings and there's no Black directors, there's no a person of color, like there's no Mexican American, there's no indigenous person, there's no Chinese person, Korean, right? These people are in, like, almost half of people in early childhood are people of color. And the next probably 5 years is going to be over half. And so if they're not in, it's because that power is that accepted norm of authority, that white people should be in charge, right? That's how it should be.
I was watching one of these with other people, other early childhood professionals, and everyone on the panel, I think there was like 5 people, were all white. And as I listened to their conversation, and I forget what it was about, but I remember just in and out thinking, that's your perception of in terms of the lens of privilege. Like you missed the boat completely by not having someone that brings a different perspective, a different lens, and that's the part that I'm irritated by. Did they not notice, or does no one care?
Yeah, and I think like people do, like rarely do, like you get people like, no, I hate those people. Like I hate those people and I don't want to work with them.
Well, I kind of have some neighbors that are like me.
But most of the time in polite company.
Correct.
People aren't explicitly
right.
being
racist.
Right. It's a more passive and it's more nice. And so not looking at like not just the individual, but systematically, like the way we're educated, those norms, and how are they institutionalized? The norm of authorities is institutionalized for white people to be in charge. And that's the expectation white people have. That's the expectation that people of color have, right?
The white people be in charge.
Yes. And so, and like there is a risk, like I said before, like I don't necessarily, like people still are mad at me and like talk about me behind my back, like when I speak out about this. But I am in a different place where I can like post it and something happens, right? People get activated when I bring it to people's attention. And so things are gonna happen. Even in that one conference that's about to start, like they're scrambling now to try to fix it and make amends. And so and it's not perfect. Like there's still a lot of critique, but they're not the only one, right?
No. I mean, I'm one of them.
This week. But most conferences have primarily white people presenting and in charge. Most planners, the people that choose the people that get to present are mostly white or are just upholding a white standard. Like they're looking for that norm of authority to be white. And then if they do have diversity, sometimes they bring in someone white that might be just, I'm going to just tell the story.
Okay.
So there's a state conference a couple of years ago that had the white rapping dad as their feature presenter. What I know is that the majority of, like, they have a large Black community, and I know that a couple of people who do hip hop and engage children around that their workshop has been denied multiple years. And so like they've tried, like, so they've had jazz, like that's kind of been okay. Like they've offered other things, but when they offered hip hop and wanted to talk to teachers about how to incorporate hip hop culture, they've been denied. But here's this white guy, like the cool dad rapping. Everybody is like, yeah, or like all the teachers and everybody's going crazy over him. So like that's upholding that norm of authority. Because I can't bring my own culture, and when I do bring my own culture, that's not good enough. But if a white person does it, that's great.
Look how cute that is.
Look how cute that is. And they pay that person good money to come and do that. And so that's mostly what's happening, especially right now, because a lot of people, want to appear that they're not being racist. A lot of people want someone to come and talk about race and racism and culture. But a lot of them are still getting their favorite white person to come and talk about that. And usually this white person is like newly activated and actually doesn't have the analysis necessary to talk about it.
Yeah.
And I can name I won't name it, because I don't even like I don't know what's going on right now.
You only have so much.
I only have so much bandwidth today.
Yeah.
But
you want me to put the hand on the pole for you?
But like we have to, as a community, we need to start being responsible and not just noticing, but taking action around when we see white people all of a sudden like being talking about anti-racism, putting out resources, right? That actually aren't anti-racism, racist. Like they're just like a lot of times showing Black pain,
right?
Black death, right? Like talking about all the bad things that are happening to build awareness.
Right.
And they only hold a stereotypical view of what it means to be a Black child. And we don't hold those people accountable because like they're our favorites, right? They've been in this field, a lot of times in this field a long time, or they've done other work that people are really impressed with. Like, but they know child development. But just because you know child development doesn't mean that you have a critical race analysis, which is needed for this time. Like it's always been needed, but we're going to have these honest conversations. We're really going to have diversity and inclusion that we say we're about. Then we have to have that analysis, and we have to demand it from the people that are in charge, and also bring in the people that look like me and Estella into being in charge and holding the power and the resources, because that's actually equity.
I gotta get a play microphone that I can just drop every so often that doesn't make a lot of noise. I'm gonna work on that. And then I'm going to say, okay, Stella, what else you want to say?
I'm not sure what to add to that. I think that, again, I'm going back to my little panel, because these are the folks who are very well regarded in the field of early childhood. And I've been watching social media, and there are several of them that have never posted anything in regards to supporting children of color, communities of color, the effort that we're making right now to really, it's like, I'm saying speaking loud and saying what we need, what needs to happen in our field. And I want to be inclusive of not just our 0 to 5 realm, but because I do K through 3rd grade work, a lot of that in our elementary schools too. I mean, I think that we need to, oh, now I can feel myself being triggered right now.
Right there. Take a breath.
Because what's happening in the K-3 world right now, and I don't want to say education in general. I mean, it's very difficult for me to be witness to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It brings me back to the uniform thing. The uniform thing that we were talking about.
Go ahead. Let's unpack that just a little bit.
So one of my colleagues, her daughter started kindergarten, and they were given instruction. And I do believe this is a Title I school. So they were given instruction how to report like onto Zoom. Or Google Classrooms or whatever it was, and that they needed to have breakfast and have their uniform on in the morning to report to class by like whatever it was, like 8:15 or something like that. And that didn't sit well with me, like for lots of reasons. I mean, when I looked at the schedule, that didn't sit well with me. The whole you need to have breakfast, and I'm thinking about kids who don't have that easily accessible to them, and then the whole uniform thing. So it was like one thing, like every bullet I was like triggered.
I have it. I'm going to really trigger you. I'm going to bring it up here so that we can look at this together. I'll take mine off. Give me 2 seconds here, because I think just a second. Okay, I'm getting there. I'm going to be so proficient by December you won't even know who I am. All right, so Isela?
So it says, attendance will be taken 10 minutes into class and then reported into the system. So if you are 10 minutes late, you're going to get some sort of consequence, is what I'm assuming here.
Yeah.
Students need to be ready for class in uniform. Breakfast completed before school starts, because you may not eat while we are, in class. If you have,
you're not in class, you're at home.
I know. So wait, let's get through this. Then we can go off.
Sorry.
If you have internet or accessibility issues, please message me ASAP.
And how do you message them?
I know if you don't have that.
Sorry, we're getting all the way through the list. Sorry.
Yeah. Students wearing headphones with video on so teachers can see their face. Okay, so there's been lots of stuff around that too, right? Yes. About video on. All right, so I don't know if we need to go through. Kinder students are new to Zoom, so it's understandable if they need a couple days to adjust. If they can't last the whole time, they may log off. You may gradually increase their time online until they are able to do the full day. Kindergarten, the full day. All right. So now let's talk.
Let's breathe. Let's lean into it. I don't know.
So that norm of authority, right?
Yes, let's go back to that.
This teacher thinks, like, school sets the norm, right? And that norm is white dominant culture, and what the expectation and who gets to be policed, right? Like the system of school is set up for children of color to be policed. And to get them to conform so they can do the work that needs to be done to support.
And then I would say, because we don't see disability as diversity, it's also set up to segregate.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as bad in the sense of like the policing for sure, but it's going to lead to segregation for sure if you have a difference in ability.
Mm-hmm.
Because just listening at that whole list, right?
Right. And also that thinking about your authority, like they're in their homes. You do not have authority in children's homes.
Yeah. Right.
If children need to eat, if children need to wear whatever their parent put on their, whatever they put on their body, whatever their parent washed, like you live with that, right? Because you're in their homes. And that rule about uniforms and doing all that, like that wasn't right when it was in the schoolhouse.
No, yeah.
And so thinking about who's in authority and the purpose of that authority. that authority is to hold children back, right? It's to have children not be successful, right? Because it's a punitive system. Because you don't show up, not only you have to show up, but you have to show up in a way that we deem appropriate.
Yeah. Yeah.
And if you don't do that, you will be punished.
Yeah.
That's what school is about? Because that sounds like prison.
I thought you said Christmas. And I'm like,
it sounds like Christmas. No, I even just the attendance thing. We're on campus, not on campus, in the homes. That whole you're tardy, you need to be here by a certain time, you can't come to school. I really, in my heart, believe that that's exactly what it's about. It's about control. And if you really wanted to reach children and families and you wanted them to feel as an inclusive part of this community, that would not be the issue that you are trying to lead them to.
No, and so I just had to pull up one other thing. There was this thing. It says, online work will be graded. Uniforms mandatory. WAP, we ain't playing. Like, what it?
Yeah, you are
broadcast to the world. Not like, we're so happy that you're still alive. We're so happy that we're making it through this pandemic. We can't wait to celebrate today with you. No, we ain't playing. You better wear your uniform and be on.
What are you gonna do?
Put you in prison.
You coming to my house? Because you come to my house, we're gonna have some work. Like
what like to the teacher, it's saying to them that it's disrespectful, anything other than that. That's how I hear it. It's like it's saying, if you deviate from this set of rules that I got pushed down onto me, now I have to make you uphold them. So now it's a compliance and control. And it's saying I have authority over you.
Yep. Yeah. And that's why some adults get, like, you're being honest, that's why some adults get into education. So they can have authority and power over children and clearly other adults.
And we perpetuate that in pre-service, in service, in all of these places that we allow that norm of authority, either in the person, because that was the other part of this. It's not just the who, it's the what.
It is.
It's not just the, we got enough of the ratios, like you were talking about, Isela, like we figured out what the demographics are, and we got them to be experts in their content. But then you got to look at the content. Is the content also just upholding the norm?
Yep. Yeah. There's a social media story going around. So I think you shared it about a worksheet that was sent home asking children about their background. And it was a line around immigration, like, how did your families come to America? And the school-age child like wrote back and like read that woman for filth, basically. Like, why would you ask me that? Like, you don't know, like, I'm a descendant of enslaved people. Like, we were stolen. That's how we got here. And so for you to assume that everyone's a European immigrant,
or that you weren't already here before we took your land.
You're already here, like, if you're indigenous.
Yeah.
And so, like, that norm of authority, right? Who controls the narrative? Who has the power? And so people and children are educated in that. But clearly, like, this child has gotten the alternative narrative. Right. And thank goodness that her family supported her and sent that back. And now, like, the adults have to have some other conversations about curriculum, right? Because this norm of authority, like, the authority isn't great. And the authority doesn't actually know. The authority is really in place to uphold white supremacy. And we have to be honest with that. The way that we talk to history, everything that we do. And representation, and what we give, what we assume,
what we allow, what we don't say, what we don't notice,
right? Who we center, because that activity centers. And like, thinking about that same narrative comes up in early childhood, like about me. I've seen lots of about me papers that
Activities.
get sent home, or families fill it out, or like they do International Day and they tell people like, oh, we'll talk about your country of origin. Right? Where did you immigrate from? Like like that salad analogy, the mixing bowl, the soup, whatever analogy.
Whatever we're making.
Right? But like we tell that narrative in early childhood all the time. And we don't know actually how to talk about the history of enslavement. We don't know how to talk about indigenous culture. Like we don't know how to talk about any of that. We just know how to talk about a whitewashed history.
And I will tell you that in most recent, like last year, I'm in kindergarten classrooms and they're still telling the Columbus story.
Yeah,
they're still making the head with the feathers, and they're still doing that. Like I every time I see it, I have to step back and go, really? Like this is really still a part of your curriculum.
Yeah, and we have to go. Like we're gonna get Columbus Day, and we're gonna get Thanksgiving with the headdress and the pilgrim hats. Like it's coming.
Yep. Yeah. And so that right there goes back again to the post that I read. It's like it's the fear around, or maybe just didn't even recognize it.
Right.
Or, it's like, okay, so now that we're helping you see that, then what?
Yeah.
Because when I look at like the uniform thing, so many, where that school is, I know that there are teachers of color working at that school district. I know that there are, it's close to where I live. I know that there are. And so I'm going to say we loosely adopt this, that is an okay thing for us to have as an expectation of children, because that's what's going to help them become, civil people in this world, according to, these norms that we have adopted and withheld, right? Or upheld. Upheld, yeah. So it's like, okay, so now what? Now what are you going to do?
Yeah, let's talk about that. What could each of us do? Yeah, sorry, Juma.
Like people like that, it's a real concern, right? That concern about how is my child going to survive, or how are my students going to survive being in this system? And one of the ways that seems to work is to assimilate into the system, like learn how to follow the rules, even if that means giving up who you are and how you are. Even if it doesn't really meet your needs, like adjust, right? And so we're going to try to teach you how to adjust and Godspeed.
Yeah. Well, and then we'll use Bettina loves that's the spirit murdering.
That's the spirit murdering. And a lot of us have gone, like as a person of color, as a Black woman, a lot of us have gone through that, right? And like, instead of us we're held up as like this shining example, but no one really talks about what we might have given up in order to get to this place. Right? And I don't want that for children. And children shouldn't have to put up with that. Like the system needs to change.
And so as you guys think about what could we offer to folks to try to do when they see a conference they're going to attend, or a professional development that they're going to do, or they take a course. I know it's like all the way into the curriculum that we're doling out to children as well, but let's just go back up to the curriculum that we're giving adults, because that's where we started, and this accepted norm of authority. And we're like, but they're famous. They've done a lot of research and they wrote 8 books, but what could we as people do? You shared what you did, Ijuma, and you maybe want to restate it, but what could we do? What do we invite people to try to do when they now can notice it? Or let's say like me, I notice it, I feel it right in here and it doesn't feel good, but I just go around going, that sucks. That didn't feel good, but I didn't do anything.
So I think recognizing your sphere of influence and what privilege like you do hold,
Mm.
right? It's like you can influence someone, right? There's something that you can do. So maybe you might know the organizer and you can like talk to that person. And maybe if you feel like you don't like, or you're nervous and you don't know what to say, that's why it's always good to be in community, right? And get you a buddy or two to help you either practice what to say one-on-one or go with you to talk about it with this person, especially if that person holds more power and privilege than you, right? Like, don't try to do it alone. Like, there's no lone wolves here, right? Think about, like, yes, we all have an ethical responsibility to speak out about this and to name when it's showing up and not participate. Because the other thing you can do is just not participate. Like, you can say something like, you know what, I was going to register for this because I was really interested, but I see that you only have a white panels and white presenters, so I can't do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I want to answer that question,
Mm-hmm.
but going back to that thing that we posted about the uniforms and the time, why I think we need to have the courage, the humility to start asking, why do we do what we do? Like, just as teachers, in my grade level team, like, why is this an expectation? Why have we created this norm? Where does that come from? What is the need for this? Like, we need to start asking the whys and going down deep into understanding and start to dismantle these things that really are about control.
Mm-hmm.
And the more we do that, and see, there's that undertone for me. It's like the more we do that, the more we keep people exactly where we want them to be. And that's the thing that I find irritating, because I'm going to give you a quick another story. I'm in elementary schools. The bubble in the mouth, walking in a straight line. And in some school districts, they have a tape that's like a foot or so many inches from the wall, so the kids won't touch the wall. So now we've got, and I've seen this with 3-year-olds. So schools that have 3 young children, 3 years of age on up, they walk with a bubble. And don't get me started on the bubble, because I have a whole talk on the bubble on my YouTube, because I can't deal with the bubble. I'm like, let's have you put a bubble in your mouth right now. So the bubble, and then hands behind their back.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so for little kids, they just learned how to walk. Okay, so we're going to do that. We're just going to talk about that developmentally. We're not even going to get into what that looks like, right? Hands behind their backs, walking in a straight line. I'm like, where the hell do we do that? In prison. In prison.
In prison. That's where it's from.
Yes. So there's that whole we have adopted these systems, these ways, these norms that we do in our schools, and we don't push back. We have to start having these conversations. And when I say this to teachers are like, yes, this is great. They go back, and then they don't know what to do. Like, they have to practice the process of helping children learn to walk. That doesn't happen overnight, right? And we're talking littles. So 4 and 5-year-olds. We walk together. Let's do this. It's going to take practice from us to get from point A to point Z. But the perception then becomes, you can't control your kids. You're not doing what needs to, and then that becomes a disservice to them. And so then teachers feel helpless because they don't have the time to perfect a new craft, a new perspective, to learn how to do this and to help children be a part of the process, as opposed to be part of, to be controlled. That's what we've got. Teachers have to start have the courage to have these conversations, to question.
Mm-hmm. And it just reminds me, Ijuma, of the very first webinar you and I collaborated on, which seems like a lifetime ago, when you said we need to be talking about racism even during a pandemic, because I can feel people think, Isela, as I was listening to you, I want to drop my mic again. And then I was thinking, oh, are we just adding more on the shoulders of teachers? And then I hear, I don't know what shoulder you're on. Like, this is not the time to take steps backwards. This is not the time to say, well, we're kind of busy right now. We're a little bit overloaded. So we'll worry about those big things like seclusion, exclusion, push out. Yeah.
Like the time is now.
The time is now.
Well,
And
I agree with that. The time is now, but I just had recent conversations with schools, and it feels like they're so caught up in we have to meet so many minutes, we have to meet so many of these things. It's like we have to do assessments. How about we just be together and learn about each other and who you are and what you bring and your talents and my talents, and why don't we start there? But it's like, I don't
you
know.
gotta let it go. Like now's the time to let it
go.
It wasn't right before. Like our assessments weren't right. The rules and the practice and policies weren't right. Let it go.
How children became eligible, what we called typical, what was special ed.
You gotta let it go. And stop trying to control people in their houses. Like,
let's just leave it at that. Stop trying to control people in their houses. Come on.
You're power tripping, and it's become super clear. Like it's become super clear that those rules were not right. Because now you're trying to impose it, and now it really looks like you don't know what you're doing. It really looks like you're just about power and control.
Right. Which the system is. And
right.
I feel like that's what we have to keep coming back to.
What it always does.
The system's there to persist.
Mm-hmm.
It will find a way unless we get it together and disrupt it enough.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's do a takeaway. So we've got some ideas starting to float, like notice it, humility, courage, come together, get friends, notice where you have the privilege, notice where you have some opportunity to say something. So we've got a few ideas floating there. What's your takeaway, each of you, from today's conversation, either for yourself or for our community to think about? I know it's kind of abrupt, but
Go ahead, Isela.
We've talked about this a few times with regard to this is time. Here's an opportunity for us to really think about why we show up each day and how we're going to show up each day. Like we've talked about this several times. And I really, in my heart, believe that this is such, like I said, an opportunity. But when I have conversations with administrators who are making decisions at the top level, it really still feels like we're just trying to make do for now.
Right.
And we're still chasing the memory of what education is supposed to be like. And it's been really disheartening for me the last week or so, because I realized that in so many ways we're still missing the boat about what children need. So I really think that this is a grassroots effort for us, for those of us who have it in our heart, to question the norm, to question like I said, even the attendance. Like, you're not going to get folks to school if you are trying to control that whole situation. And oftentimes kiddos who struggle to get to school come from parents who struggle to, even in their own childhood, possibly. Yeah. And so we want to invite families in. We want them to feel comfortable. We want them to feel like this is a place that they can call their community. So you don't do that by trying to push power and your control over them. They get further and further behind and further detached from what could potentially be such an important part of their extended community. Mm-hmm. So it's like, I feel like we have to be willing to say, to lean in, to push the norm, to have courage to question. And so for me, it's, standing up each day and continuing these conversations with those that I can, possibly influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to build on that because mine's going to be really white centered for a minute. So it's pretty narrow. And then in June, I want you to bring us home. I feel like the invitation for those of us who are white or even who pass for white is we've got to see the norm. We've got to see the norm. Like, I see it, but I have to see it. Then I've got to challenge the norm And that's for me is going to go two ways. I've got to widen my circle and understand that it's on me to do the work, to find out all of these amazing networks and agencies and experts that I could be inviting to my podcast, that I could be co-teaching with, that I could be offering to other people who say, Christy, do you know somebody who knows? So that's on me. And then I want to really think about the privileges that I hold and where I can do something that is a little bit more of a risk that's so outside of my nature, but to write to the person or to call it out on social media, which is so not in my nature as this basic nice white lady. I might complain about it on YouTube, but not to your face. So I'm going to really work on those two things. Widen my circle.
I think we should talk about the word nice at some point.
Okay.
Like the messages that white women get. I didn't get the message to be nice.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't. Not that I get the message to be kind, but that whole niceness, I think we need to talk about it. Because
if I'm the teacher, that's my lens, and that's how all right. Ijuma, what's your takeaway for us?
That we have work to do, and that we need to hold ourselves and others accountable, right? That we can't let it go anymore. So everyone that's listening to this recording, everyone in the live, hey, Claudia, hey, Emily, like this is our work to do together. And so like, it's not a choice. You've heard this, and you should be moved to action. And even if you don't do it right, like that's why you have your community to have your back. Yeah. But now is the time to take action.
Beautiful. All right. So we're going to try to do this every month. My friends said, let's do it every other week. And then I was like, hi, this is so much. My poor white comfort. No, it really wasn't that. It was just like wanting to do it thoughtfully. So we're going to try it every month. It'll be the first Tuesday of the month. Maybe we'll go back to doing it every other week. We don't know. We'll see how it goes. We got a lot to talk about. So
we do, obviously.
Who knows? But we appreciate those who joined us and or who have listened back, and we look forward to seeing what action y'all take. And I'll put our website up really quick, and then we'll just head out. So you can follow us. You can write to us, ask questions, things you want us to talk about. There's a form on our website, and not that we can't come up with our own topics, but we'd love to know what you're thinking about.
Yeah.
All right.
Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel.
Oh, yeah. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. Then we can have enough followers that we can have our own URL.
Yes. We're trying to get to 100, right?
Yep. We just got to get to 100.
All right. Let's do it.
Fabulous. All right. Thank you, my friends.
Bye.